Hey everybody, I just wanted to let you know before we start this episode of Tabletop Babble that it's brought to you by 1985 Games and Dungeon Craft. What is Dungeon Craft? Well, let me just tell you, you're going to want to go pre-order it right now. It is awesome terrain, awesome minis that you can slap down in seconds. Amazing stock. They're basically these tiles that come in books. They work together. They're compatible on battle maps or just over with each other. They are affordable. They will really enhance your game, and they're easier than drawing a map. You just slap it down. No more worrying about trying to transport giant heavy pieces of dungeon material. These are incredible. They're really awesome. The core book comes with over 1,000 gaming pieces you can use. Plus, there's already expansions because their Kickstarter was so popular. The art is high quality and amazing, and I can't wait to use them in my next game. So go check it out at 1985games.com, 1985games.com to pre-order your copy of Dungeon Craft, and you're going to want to let them know that DSPN sent you. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am chatting with amazing game designer Craig Campbell. You know him. He's been on the show before. He is just a great guy and an amazing designer. So we talk a ton about what it takes to be an indie designer, what it's like to make a product as an indie designer, and how to deal with different revenue streams and things like that when you're basically a company of one person. It's really a fascinating chat with someone who has been doing this for years and making awesome games. So here's my conversation with Craig. Okay, everybody. So now I am here with the one and only Craig Campbell, one of my favorite people. Craig, welcome back to Tabletop Babble. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hi, James. I'm Craig Campbell. I'm the guy at Nerdburger Games. That is to say, I'm the sole owner and the only quote-unquote full-time employee or like steady part-time employee. I designed a game called Mergers and Acquisitions, another one called Die Laughing, and then the award-winning and other award-nominated Capers, which came out last year and is now kind of rolling through doing some supplements. So that's what I've been up to. I'm on the supplement train. Woo woo.
That's awesome. Yeah, Capers is a really fun game. For people who maybe missed the podcast about Capers, and they should go back and listen to, we played it on DSPN Presents. It was a really fun time. It's a great game. I've played it multiple times. I've run it. But for people who don't know, what is Capers?
It's a super-powered game of gangsters in the Roaring '20s. So essentially, you are playing a criminal, a gangster type, or potentially law enforcement during the Prohibition era in the United States when alcohol was illegal. The world has just started to see the arrival of people, the emergence of people with extraordinary abilities, and you are one of them. So yeah, it's gangsters and feds superpowers. And then there's supplements that are coming out that take the story forward into different decades and different eras. And each time those supplements introduce new character options and rules expansions and powers and all those sorts of fun things, new GM tools and everything. And then also presents an alternative criminals versus cops kind of world. And Capers Noir came first. Takes you into the 1940s and a crime noir setting with mystery and some horror elements to the game. And now, right now, I'm kickstarting CAPERS Covert, which takes the story forward to the 60s and focuses on classic James Bond style super spies and super villains with superpowers, which is a great tagline in the Kickstarter. I dig that. That's my favorite tagline of all the games that I've done.
It's really great. And I'm already a backer, day one backer. This is day one that we're recording this, and I'll just very quickly congratulate you. You are over 200% funded as of this conversation. So, and I'm sure by the time this podcast hits people's ears, there will be even more. So people should definitely check it out. It's a great Kickstarter because not only can you get CAPERS Covert, you can get whatever flavor of Capers you want as well. So you could get just the Capers RPG, the original book. You could get it with CAPERS Covert, and you can get it with CAPERS Noir. So there's a lot of ways to skin this cat that people should go check out.
It's very mix and match, and the next supplement is going to have a third. That'll be a third smaller book that it'll be even more mix and matchy. I have to figure out how to do the backer levels without getting out of control.
Yes.
Like here's 47 backer levels for all the different possible combinations you can get.
Of course. Are you allowed to talk about what the next thing is?
I can tease that. Yeah, it's half written, and it's some of it's gone out to people to help start writing some things that I don't have the time for, and that I want to try to bring another point of view, I try to farm some stuff out because I'm afraid that I might just kind of start to do the same thing over and over, bring in different imaginations and come up with other things. So there's some people that are working on some stuff. But that's for Capers Offworld, which will be kind of an alternative version of Capers set in the 20s again, anchored in the 20s. But it will be as if retro future science fiction rocket ship kind of Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon style spacefaring will happen. So it'll be space criminals and space cops in that kind of classic retro future. So like the rocket ships will look like big falls with fins on them, and all the extraterrestrial species that you run across will be like clearly things that you could do by putting people in a costume. So like here's bird people and they have wings.
That's awesome.
Nothing really weird, because that isn't something that you could do in like 20s, 30s. Nobody had really imagined that in 20s, 30s, 40s. It's that great era of like, what's it going to be like in 1960? Flying cars and aliens from another world.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Like I remember talking to my grandmother when it turned the year 2000 and saying like, what did you think the year 2000 was going to be like growing up in the Depression era and things like that? And she had this wild answer that, it's nothing. I don't think anybody even thought we'd be walking around with phones in our pocket at that point. It was something else entirely.
Yeah. There was a fellow game designer was posted onto their social media recently that they find it really odd to be sitting down and putting together a schedule for releases for 2020. And I think what he's referring to is the fact that there was once a game called Cyberpunk 2020. Like our gaming world has caught up to the future. So now you have to do, if you're going to do a near future thing, it has to be like 2060 or after.
Well, it's awesome to have you here, and congratulations again on Capers Covert and on all of your stuff that you've done. So, Craig, we've had you on the show before, and I've had you on my previous show, The Roundtable, and we were also talking on Gamer to Gamer and things like that. So I know a lot of your work, but just a quick review for people, right? In addition to the Capers, we've got Murders and Acquisitions, which is a very fun RPG. That's the first thing you did. Corporate murder.
Yeah, it's climbing the corporate ladder by whatever means necessary in an absurd, over the top corporate world. So take everything you know about the corporate world, ramp it up to the nth degree and fight for the corner office.
Absolutely. And then we've got Die Laughing, which is one of my favorite one-shot, short play, GM-less RPGs. It is incredible. You can sit down and play it with anybody, and it plays like a party game, too. It's a great way to get people into RPGs without them knowing they're playing an RPG sometimes.
Yeah, you're just telling a story, a character sheet that's got a few things on it. And then the game kind of guides you through telling a horror a horror comedy movie structure. And then the mechanics are built entirely around reducing your dice pool until you run out of dice, and that's when your character dies.
Right. But you're not out of the game because you still have a role to play as a producer, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, you become a producer so you can screw around with the movie until the end.
And then you and I actually haven't had a chance to talk about yet 4 games in 4 days, a little Kickstarter you did that is, it's already produced. The 4 games in 4 games is done, right? 4 little games, I think, is what the product is called.
Yeah, four little games. is the name of the book. It was an experiment on Kickstarter. Basically, Kickstarter was doing a thing where they were asking creators to kind of break how Kickstarter normally works and do something different. So I took the challenge of like, I've got these 4 little kind of mini games that could fit on a page or 2 each. And I'm going to take those, polish them up, kind of double check, make sure they all work and make sense, and run a 4-day Kickstarter to fund just some artwork and layout and editing for the 4 games, and then put out like a little 20-page 6x9 book of here's the book, here's the games. And so we did it as as a PDF to start with, and I think there'll probably be a print version eventually. But the PDF is out for everybody. A couple of them are kind of role-playing game oriented, where you're telling a story. One of them is a dice game. One of them's just sort of an improv game with a bunch of cues built into the game.
So you've done a lot. And before this, you did freelance writing for Wizards of the Coast during 4th edition. How many people are on your staff? Let's start there.
My staff consists of me, as far as like who would I consider to be a Nerdburger Games employee. It's me. I'm a sole proprietor, owner of an LLC, limited liability corporation. Which basically means that I'm on the hook for everything, but it's a company, so that like if something did blow up on me legally, like you're welcome to the dozens of dollars that I have in my bank account, and then I'll just go back to being an architect. But beyond like me as the guy at Nerdburger Games, because of that, there's a lot of things that A, I can't do, and B, I don't want to do. So there's a lot of freelancers. So every time you see a game book come out, there's always, at least a few. Oftentimes there might be, 10 or so people that are involved in artwork and editing and layout and graphic design, and not to mention playtesters and all that sort of thing, and all the special thanks people that get in there. There's one person who gets into the special thanks every time because she's a coworker of mine and she listens to me yammer about this. She lets me vent about stupid stuff. So she actually goes into the special thanks section of the books because she's incredibly familiar with everything I'm doing. And she's cool and she's encouraging, and she just lets me get something off my chest.
And that's important, right? I think there's a lot of things that are important to know for indie studios and the way indie studios work, because whether you're a consumer buying this stuff or whether you're thinking about going into indie publishing yourself, it's good to know the way the businesses work and how workflow works. I think often we have this perception of like all RPG companies are equal as consumers, right? That they all have the same manpower, they all have the same budget, and you can make a book appear just like that, right? And no company can do that. And especially, there's people like yourself who are out there ruining it for the rest of us by putting things out in a timely manner and having all your ducks in a row because you've been at it for a long time and because you're smart and intelligent. So I thought it would be great to pick your brain today kind of about how all of that works. And you thought it would be a good topic to talk about. So I think that's a road we should go down. As far as being an indie publisher, how does it work? Like, let's take a product you've made recently, from inception to down the line, very quickly. We don't need to go into detail with each step, but like, what is your role as the single person in the company in all of that?
Let's look at it from like the viewpoint of Capers. That was a game that the idea hit me while I was kind of in the middle of still putting Murders and Acquisitions together. And so for me, given the overlap is such that I kind of have to be working on a few things at a time. So during like the design process for Capers, I was finishing up editing and kind of nailing down the last of the playtesting for M&A. As an indie person, anybody, you're really going to be kind of wearing a lot of hats all at the same time. And it's just a matter of compartmentalizing and saying, okay, I'm going to get this taken care of for Murders and Acquisitions. Then I'm going to go over and I'm going to design and work on Capers. And you just kind of work out a schedule for what is reasonable for you. One of the nice things about, at least for me, working indie wise was it's kind of most of the time it's like it gets done when it gets done. Like I have to rush it because I have a day job and it supports me and I'm fine. So I can allow the development of something to take a while. It's basically a design period. Get enough design so that you can get playtesters going, get playtesting underway. As playtesting feedback comes back in, you're continuing to design and build out the game more, incorporating that feedback. when you start to feel, at least like when I start to feel that the game it has legs, like it's going to go forward, I'm going to try to take it to Kickstarter and get it and ask everybody for permission to make this thing, because that's what Kickstarter is. You're asking everybody, hey, is this cool enough to make? Then you start thinking about like, okay, what do I need in order to promote that? Because the game isn't going to just find an audience magically on its own. So getting a game title and a logo, maybe a handful of pieces of art that you can put on your website, that you can share on social media, that can ultimately go into a Kickstarter video and on the Kickstarter page. So I start working on getting that stuff going. And then as playtesting kind of wraps up and everything kind of gets nailed down, then there comes a point where you have to start getting commitments from people to do the bigger stuff, more stuff. Okay, you got to find one or more artists that can agree to finish up the book. Finding a layout and or graphic design person. That could be two different people, it could be the same person. Finding an editor. If you need, like the different levels of editing, do you need somebody to do developmental editing, which is to say, taking all of the information that you're providing and making sure that it reads as a technical manual, because that's what a game design manual is it teaches you how to use the product. So even if you don't need that, then you still at least want copy editing, because no writer can edit their own work, or not well.
Correct.
The spelling errors and the grammatical inconsistencies and the kind of weird way that you phrase things and the overuse of apostrophes or commas or semicolons.
For me, it's definitely underuse of commas. Like I used to be a comma fiend, and then I was like, oh no, I'm using them too much, and now I eliminate too many. And my editors are always like, why is no one allowed to take a breath when they read your stuff? Right?
I've just read 3 paragraphs and I haven't stopped to breathe one time because there's no commas.
Right.
Yeah, I've been there. So you're looking for all these people and getting them kind of locked in for a significant commitment, and you might be kind of doing at least a preliminary negotiation with them as far as rates go. They feel comfortable that when the contract arrives, they don't go, whoa, this is not what we agreed to. Then you get to a point where, okay, you've got to kind of nail down a time to run your crowdfunding, if that's what you're doing. And I'm just speaking from my own experience using Kickstarter. And it becomes a question of establishing when that's going to happen and start to ramp up toward it. Because, you can just suddenly spring a Kickstarter on people. And there are people out there that do and do it successfully. With the small audience that I have, I want to kind of build to it. So there comes a point where you kind of have to set that in place and start working toward it. And while you're doing that, then you're maybe getting things edited, or you're finalizing some of the little design bits. And it just depends on kind of your workflow for that. Some people, save all their editing. They'll design right up to the day of the Kickstarter, or sometimes they're still designing stuff after the Kickstarter. I try to get everything done and nailed down beforehand. And then, you've got a Kickstarter, you go through that whole process, which that's an episode unto itself, which we have done with Stephanie Bryant. If you still have design stuff to do, you're still dealing with that, but you're also becoming a publisher and an art director. You're becoming a developer who's cleaning up and fixing and tidying up anything that other contributors are writing. Your art director is the role where you're creating the art orders to describe to the artists what the illustrations should look like, and corresponding with them to get them moving. And then you're also responding to sketches and giving feedback and all of that sort of thing. Same thing happens with graphic design. You're going through a whole process there of back and forth. Once you have all your text, all your copy, once you have your illustrations and your art or your graphic stuff, then the layout person kind of puts that all together and makes it super pretty. The moment of truth at that point is proofing, where you are looking at, maybe first a PDF, but then also physical book proofs, if that's what you're doing. And if you can do physical book proofs, depending on how you're making the book, where you're sitting down and looking at, okay, here's an actual physical copy in my hand. Is everything where it needs to be? Does it all read well? Are the fonts good? Is the spacing on things good? Is the breaks between, then you get into all the little fiddly stuff, are the gutters is the gutter too wide? Is the margin too narrow on the outside edges? Because nobody thinks about that, but the outside edge of the book, that's where your thumbs go. You don't want your thumbs covering up words, so that usually that outer edge has a little more white space. And you're learning all of those little things. And you go through all of that, and you make your tweaks to get it to what you want it to be. And then you've got a finished product that you can get out there. And then you've completed step 1 of having a game, because step 2 becomes marketing and the initial sales tail, as they call, of trying to get that initial push out the door with your backers and with the people who maybe missed the Kickstarter, who are waiting for it to come out, and then establishing some way to market and build and allow it to continue to have sales, have a life beyond the Kickstarter fulfillment.
Hey, everybody. Just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of The Babble, are we calling it The Babble now? Maybe we're calling it The Babble. I don't know. Let me know. Tweet at me whether you love or hate the name The Babble, The Babs, the big B. So any of those. Let me know what you think. Anyway, this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Kobold Press, the makers of fine third-party 5th edition products like the Tome of Beasts. Now, you've probably heard me talk about the Tome of Beasts before. I have a monster in it, the Corpse Mound. Check it out. It's the best monster ever created. And if you go right now, you can get the Tome of Beasts Pocket Edition. It's the portable way to carry around 400 expertly crafted, play-tested, edited, and arted monsters for 5th edition from Kobold Press. The Tome of Beast Pocket Edition includes all the errata, updates, and fixes that have been made, and it measures about 6 by 9 inches. It fits in a briefcase, a backpack, a messenger bag, or whatever with ease. Maybe a pocket, if you got a big pocket. That's why it's the Pocket Edition. Tome of Beast Pocket Edition is available at the Kobold Press store at koboldpress.com and better game stores everywhere. So you're going to want this. Carry around monsters in your pocket. Boom. Throw them down. Kill some characters. Move on to the next table. That's what it's all about. Let's get back to the babble. All of these things, all of these jobs and steps that you have, what percentage of the jobs or the work, whatever the easiest way to break it down is, would you say you are hiring a freelancer on a project and you are doing yourself as the company?
An overall percentage, it's hard to say because I don't exactly know always how long it takes everybody to do the artwork and the graphics and whatnot. But for me, it's like all the artwork is farmed out to freelancers. All the graphic work goes to freelancers, layout, editing, obviously, because I can't edit my own stuff. And then I probably farm out about 20 to 40% of the writing, depending on the product. Capers, I did more of it just because I did in a complete rule system, right? So everything from the first page of the book up until about Chicago. If you read the book, you go through all the entire player section, and then the GM guidelines, right, and then the Atlantic City write-up I did, and then at Chicago is when somebody else started writing. And I had a couple people.
That's a lot of the book.
So I mean, that's easily. I mean, you're 2/3 of the way through the book before you get to Chicago, and then so there's some setting stuff, and then some stuff at the very back in the GM toolbox, which you wrote for Capers.
It's very, I would say it's the filet mignon of the book. It's the it really like, without that piece there would be no Capers, right? You and I could agree.
Well, given that it's at the end of the book, I'd say it is the high-end dessert that caps off the meal perfectly.
I like that.
We've also called it the caboose of the game.
right the foot of the table. And even that, like, we're talking about it like, oh, I did so much work, but you worked with me on that. You gave feedback, you gave notes, you probably then had to get in there and fiddle with it after I turned it over to you. So it's not like, oh, when you hire a freelancer, they do everything and you never need to worry about it. You don't need to worry about some things, and then it comes back. And sometimes you roll the dice on a freelancer and you end up doing the work anyway for one reason or another. Sometimes there's an act of God, somebody gets sick, a family member gets ill, a house gets knocked down, things that they can't control, and now the work is left to you. And sometimes the person wasn't right for the job, and that can happen too.
And sometimes they were right for the job, save for one little thing. Like one thing you can see is that, like, when you read a RPG book, that there's usually a voice that comes across, right? There's a style of writing that's in there, and it's usually pretty consistent. For the core writer, they're writing kind of in their voice. But you might get a freelancer who comes up with really good ideas, has really cool evocative stuff, and you want to use all of it, but you have to reword a lot of it because it doesn't sound like the rest of the book. And that can happen. And for people who are wondering what the developer is, that is in part what the developer does. When you see the developer credits at the beginning of the book, that's the person that kind of takes the rough draft of things, fleshes it out, coordinates it with other things in the game, make sure that everything makes sense. And sometimes part of it is to, make it hit the right voice.
There's a lot of work that goes into even managing and working with your freelancers too.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
It becomes part of, because you're still the project lead on these things. And I think that's an important thing to realize too, is the coordination of all this takes a lot. What do you look for in freelancers? Like, how do you find people to work with? I think a lot of us, I know where to find writers, right? Because that's what I do, but I don't necessarily know a great way to find artists, maybe, or I don't know a great way to find, development editors as opposed to copy editors or that kind of thing.
Well, there's a bunch of ways to do it. I started with some of the writers was, for simplicity's sake, because that's the only reach I had, was I started with people that I knew, either friends or people that I had gotten to know a little bit during freelancing. When I was doing stuff for D&D. So people kind of started there. But then as you get to kind of get into the RPG industry to some extent, and you start to follow people on Twitter and they're following you and you're Facebooking back and forth, and maybe you chat with people on some Discord or another, you get to know people, and that starts to grow a base of people that you can draw upon. You can start just putting requests out into those spaces and say, hey, I'm looking for a copy editor for an RPG. And you may not have a copy editor following you on Twitter, but you may have some people who are following you who know a copy editor, and they'll add that person into the conversation. For some roles on the book, you can reach out to, there are services online and websites online. Artwork in particular, like I know a lot of people love to go looking through DeviantArt to find artwork. You can likely find some people who are chomping at the bit to do something for an RPG. That's like something that they've wanted to do. Personally, just keep in mind that everything here is my experience and just my opinion. And there are, you have to kind of, with anybody that you don't know, you have to kind of feel them out a little bit. And you got to be prepared that maybe you're going to get burned on something. You might get somebody who just is as good as seemed to be at first, and you have to be prepared. So backup plans are important. But I had really good luck with artists on freelancer.com and upworks.com. It's where I found artists for mergers and acquisitions. And then that turned into me finding Varney, who has now done a crap ton of artwork for me because I love working with her and I like her style. And now she's the CAPERS person. But another thing, just going back to the artwork too, there's Twitter. Every so often you see Twitter, something will get going virally with some hashtag for an artist hashtag, where there'll be like an artist that'll have a self-portrait and a few pieces that they've done, and they post that up, and if you follow that hashtag, you might find all sorts of people that do all sorts of different types of styles, and are, like this person's really good with people. And then you can go and look, and that's what they're showing you anyway, right? And then you go look at their portfolio and say, oh, and now they also do airships and weapons and monsters. And it just so happens that I have a game featuring weapons and airships and monsters and people. But it takes time to find all those people. And graphic design is the same way. You can find graphic designers via freelancer.com and upworks.com, and you can also reach out into the community.
Sounds great. And it sort of brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is the money, right? Because all of those people need to be paid. You often want to pay, and like generally, right? People want to pay a good competitive rate, a livable rate if you're able to do so. How are you able to first manage that, get all the money in, like there's, because we also, you're talking about multiple revenue streams, right? You've got your Kickstarter revenue stream, but then you might also have revenue streams from Patreon, or you might have revenue streams from selling on drive-through and maybe on Amazon or other sites like that. Like, how does all of that get managed so that people can be paid, including yourself? Presumably, you would also like to make some money for your work.
Well, when you're starting out, you may end up having to do what I did, which was to just like scrape the barrel and find just enough money to do just enough to make the Kickstarter happen. It's like I can pay for 7 pieces of artwork and a logo, a game title. And that's what I've got. And I have to make a video and a page work with that and say, this is what the game's going to look like. And so, you pay out of pocket a little bit. If you have if you already have methods of bringing money in, whether it's with Ko-Fis or Patreon for other little projects and things that you do, maybe take the time to kind of set some of that money aside for a while, and don't actually use the Ko-Fi to buy your coffee that day, but rather, set it aside and just kind of build a little nest egg to get started. Once you do that, once you've, actually got a product out there that's selling some, then it becomes, I think, important to, like, the way I kind of approached it was, I made Murders and Acquisitions because I wanted to see if I could. And then when I made that and it funded on Kickstarter, it did well enough for me to make like a few $100s myself. Then I was going into Capers, and I was kind of like, okay, this is no longer just me making a thing because I can. This is me, like, this is a business now. So I have to start thinking about it in terms of a business, which means that when you start making money off of something, some amount of that, and you need to decide what that is for yourself, some amount of that has to go back into the company. Some amount of that goes back into funding artwork and graphic work that you need to do upfront to get the next game made, or supplement or adventure or whatever. Some of that money can get earmarked toward actually, doing other things that might normally come out of pocket that you want to start thinking about, like, are you going to go to Gen Con and try to show your stuff off in some way? You can start putting money toward that. It becomes where you can pull the money from, where it comes from, and starting to account for it as a business. So, like for me, it's a single, sole proprietor LLC. So it's all technically under my taxes. I just file, I don't have to file separate corporate taxes because it's just me. If I had a partner in the LLC, we would have to file separate taxes for the company. So, but I have a separate bank account for the company. So the money that's in there is what's in the company. Now, like you said, I would like to get paid from time to time. So from time to time, there's a transfer that takes place from that bank account to my bank account. And then sometimes there's a transfer that takes place the other direction where I then, quote unquote, reinvest in my company. Because I decide, hey, I've got a big expense coming up and my coffers are kind of looking a little dry. So I'm going to spend money. I'm going to put some money back in there, and I'm going to kind of, hopefully you don't have to do that too much, but, I need to be prepared to do that, because that's, in any small business, that is something that the small business person may do. There may be times when the money is tight and they have to effectively take a pay cut of their own. And the way you do that when it's all kind of one big pile of money is just say, I'm going to take some of the money that I consider mine and put it back into the company. And I'm going to use that money to help get this stuff done, to get ready for a Kickstarter or to go to a convention or whatever. And then there's a lot of like stuff that you can kind of do in your head too. Like I would go to conventions anyway, right? So most of the time I consider my convention expenses to, technically I can, for tax purposes, call them business expenses, but I also don't necessarily take that money out of the company. That's just money that I would spend to go to Gen Con or to a Catacon or whatever. So I can treat it as money that's part of the company, and it becomes a business expense, and I can call it that. For me, in my head, it's like I would be spending that money myself anyway. So like now I can look at Nerdburger Games over the past year and say that it's been a profitable company this year. It's actually made money. And I can tell you how much, and I know that it's actually a pretty good number. But then again, at the same time, like I spent money to go to Gen Con this year. So maybe technically I didn't make as much for the company. If you kind of take that money out of the company too, it's it would be a little different if the company were, separate for tax purposes. But when it's all me, it's like, it's how you're kind of earmarking it and what you're using and how. But then you just keep track of all of that stuff through through the online services that you use, through PayPal for, you keep track of all your payments coming in and out. If that's how you're doing your payment for everything, how you're paying your freelancers, PayPal, your bank account, and then, track it with, spreadsheet or accounting software or however complex. It depends on how complex it gets. For a company, I'm getting to the point that I'm almost complex enough that I'm going to start thinking about QuickBooks. But right now, thus far, I've been able to keep track of it with just kind of like really simple spreadsheet kind of tracking.
Exactly. Yeah. And because I write and produce TV commercials, and that business that I set up to do that freelance also covers my RPG work, right? Introcaso Creative LLC covers all of that. And so because the television world has gotten complex enough for me, especially with the RPG stuff now mixed in, that I have an accountant who helps take care of that too, which is not a bad way. When you're considering freelancers, it's not necessarily a bad person to look at, because one of the things is, right, presumably you got into this because you like writing and designing games and playing games, right? I don't know about you, but I'm not like a huge marketing fan. I'm not like a huge...
I am not a publisher or marketer because I want to be.
Right, exactly.
I want to design.
Exactly. So how do you... I guess two questions. How do you do that stuff in a nutshell? Because those are both podcasts in and of themselves, right? But how do you also motivate yourself to do the parts of this that you don't want to do, right? Like, how do you think, okay, it's time to market this game, it's time to do this, yada yada. What keeps you there and keeps you doing this, especially now that you've done it time and time again?
For me, I'm a to-do list. I'm ridiculously organized as far as like kind of keeping a to-do list that I'm like updating on like an every other day kind of basis almost. I do a lot of things in dribs and drabs, like do a little of this, do a little of that, do a little of this, so that I'm not spending hours on end just doing marketing based stuff, or I'm not spending hours on end dealing with the publishing side of things. I'll be like, okay, I know I've got a bunch of contracts that I got to write, and I got to get people writing, get going on writing stuff, and I got to put together, materials for them so that they can write what they need to do. And that's like, so, all right, I'll do it for two of my freelancers, and I'll get two contracts written, and I'll put together the guideline material and the template and everything to get them writing on something. And it's like, okay, and that's done. And a couple days later, or, the next week or whatever, then I'll do the other ones. And I, that way I can regularly come back to the design stuff. That is what I'm actually enjoying more, really. Then it's sort of like once you get something done, when you've designed a game or an adventure or whatever it is, right? And you're proud of it. You want to see it out in the world. And, you do your Kickstarter, and it's like, okay, now I put this thing into the hands of, 300 people or whatever your Kickstarter backers were. Okay, well, that's as far as it's going to go unless I do more, because there will be the occasional person who pops on to Drive-Thru RPG and swims around in that, ocean of product and happens upon your thing and goes, "Ooh, that's neat." But, you probably have to spend some time. You have to build a social media audience. You need to find forums to post to, become part of a community of various communities, get to know podcasters and streamers and so forth, and build relationships there so that they'll help to kind of say something nice about your thing or feature your game.
They're the worst people too.
Podcasters are freaking terrible. They are worst. They are the absolute worst. Except for all the podcasters that I work with regularly. They are the best. They are wonderful.
I agree with that sentiment.
But and if you're into the gaming community, it shouldn't be that hard. Even if it's just, do it in bits and pieces. If you don't want to be like on social media like constantly, you don't have to be on it constantly. Just do like a little bit every day, or a little bit every other day. I mean, I took the tack of after CAPERS, when CAPERS was in Kickstarter, I decided, I looked at my Twitter followers and like 250 Twitter followers. That's fine. That's not nearly enough. Like this is going to be a legitimate game company. So I spent the next year making a concerted effort to post as interesting of things as I could, not just promotional stuff, but also just engage the community and get to know people, and become part of that community with the intention of over the course of the next year trying to grow my Twitter following at whatever rate I could get it to grow. I didn't have a goal in mind or anything like that. And so you just do it. I just did it in little bits and pieces. Like I would just try to make sure to be posting something and retweet and like and comment on other stuff. If people comment at you, you respond as much as you're able to. Engage with the people. You'd be surprised how far that goes. Like at some points, you're gonna promote a Kickstarter, and somebody's gonna look at that and go, "Oh, that's the guy that I had a nice little exchange with, 2 months ago on Twitter," and they're gonna remember that you were kind and that you had a piece of good advice, or you cracked a funny joke or whatever. They may retweet and tell their friends about your game because of that. So it's all bits and pieces. It's becoming, if you're going to be in the industry, you need to also be in the community.
Yeah, especially in indie design, right? Like
yeah, absolutely.
It's a big way you get to know a lot of great people too. Like even that part, the time investment is not just worth it from a business standpoint. It's also worth it from like you make a lot of cool friends, you really do.
Yeah, and you make friends with people that you get to meet at conventions that you've never met in person before, and that's fun. So it's like like I've seen James at a few conventions now. When I do see at the conventions, like, "Hey, James, how's it going?" But the first couple times that we hung out at a convention, after only knowing you online, it was like, "Wow, this is really kind of cool." It's like sit down with James and play a game, and you get to do that with everybody, and you get to do that with people who are just followers, or who are into the same thing that you're into, or are part of like that this person over here does copy editing. You know them, as somebody that's been suggested for that. You haven't necessarily used them, but you meet them in person for a minute, and you exchange business cards, and you chat briefly, and you get to realize, this is this person that I think I could work with.
Right, exactly. And it's also great because you get to finally play a game together. You know what I mean? Like you might have been talking about games, but maybe you haven't actually played any. There is just so much to manage, and there's a lot going on, but it does seem like it can be very rewarding to do your own thing, especially because then you get to make the games you want to make. You get to put the products in the world you would like to see in the world, which I think is pretty cool. What do you think as far as like, I think, if we want to end this thing on a high note, what do you like about being an indie game designer and your own company?
I don't have to ask anybody permission to do anything. And I'm going to joke, and it's partly true, but also not really. It's a small piece of it until I ask people with the Kickstarter, until I ask everybody permission. Is this cool enough? Do you want to see this game? But like during that whole process, the Kickstarter is its own special kind of hell, and it's its own special kind of stress. But most of the time, you're not in the middle of that. Most of the time, you're just designing a thing, and you're saying, "Oh, and I think there should be this, or I think there should be a monster that's like this." And you don't want to pass anybody. You just say, "Nope, I'm gonna make that monster." Why? Because I can. And I make the joke, especially like on top of it, I'm a single guy living, no roommates, no kids, where and I can extend the metaphor. I've made this joke about just personal stuff, but I can extend it to gaming, where I can be sitting here working on game stuff, clickety, clickety, click, right? And I can say, "Hey, everybody, I'm gonna make a monster about X, Y, and Z. Does anybody have a problem with that? You think that's a good addition to the game, or is that a crappy idea? Nobody's got any opinions? All right." Back to it. I'm making monster that does XYZ. And and then you put it into the playtester's hands, and hopefully they like it. Yeah, you can do so much of it that it's under your control. That's probably the thing that I enjoy the most. It is stressful at times. It is a lot of work. It is continuous work. Unless you can take breaks and come back to stuff, but you kind of do lose momentum potentially if you do that. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot to do, but the ability to create the thing that you want to create the way you want to create it, and have it be yours, is very, very enticing.
Well, before we go, let's tell everybody one more time about the thing that is yours. If people want to check out CAPERS Covert or anything else that you're doing, where should they go and what should they do?
Well, you can go to nerdburgergames.com. That's the webpage where all the games and general information is. If you want to buy any of my game stuff after the Kickstarter is done, you can go to drivethroughrpg.com. Right now, during the Kickstarter, you can get Covert and Capers Noir and Capers and Die Laughing and M&A PDFs. There's add-ons. There's different different backer levels, all sorts of different ways to get different things. So check that first, and go to check out the Capers Covert RPG on Kickstarter, and over on the Twitter, I am at NerdBurgerCraig.
Yes, and when he hits 1,000 followers, he'll do a giveaway.
Whoa, wait, what? I could probably come up with something. He'll do a giveaway. Thanks a lot, James.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it.
It was a fun little discussion. I hope maybe words that I had to share will help warn some people about some of the potential pitfalls, but hopefully mostly inspire them to make the thing that they want to be theirs.
That was a great chat with Craig. Now, listen, there's something that I wanted to let you know about Mr. Campbell. Craig forgot to tell us that he is available to consult. He wants to help people do things. So if you go to nerdburgergames.com/hire Craig, you can have Craig work with you to help burgeoning designers with design consulting, art direction, Kickstarter coaching, things like that. Craig really knows his stuff. He's been making games for years. So go check him out if you want his help, and you do. nerdburgergames.com/hire-Craig. nerdburgergames.com/hire-Craig. There will also be a link in the show notes over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. You know, if you want to support Tabletop Babble and me, head on over to patreon.com/Introcaso. That's patreon.com/Introcaso, where you can take a monthly survey to help decide the direction of the show. Check out some awesome live stream videos that I make, Q&A videos, and little extra pieces of written content for your eyes or ears, I guess, if you have something that reads them out loud to you. So yeah, go check that out. It's over at patreon.com/Introcaso. It helps support the show, and we appreciate it so much. And, you know, I just wanted to encourage you to also support the show by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. Seriously, if you leave a 5-star review on iTunes, I will read it out loud, credit the person who left it. You can make me say anything you want. Now, we haven't had any new reviews so far in September, as far as I can tell. So please, please, please go leave us a review. It will be a great birthday gift for me, which is not in September, but the beginning of October. So I will be 34. So what I would like for my birthday, 34 new reviews by October. Can it be done? I don't know. Maybe you don't love me enough. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso. That's at JamesIntrocaso. Also, check out my blog, World Builder Blog, which is all about the game design stuff I'm doing. And as a bonus, hey, did you get Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus? Guess what? We got 2 cool products from the DMs Guild Adepts we put out. Hell to Rel. Wonder what that's about. Go check that out. Go to Hell in a Holy City? I don't know. And then we've also got Encounters in Avernus. Hell to Rel I did with Mishan Cantrell, who is an amazing cartographer, but I did all of the design work on that. But I did work with a lot of other people on Encounters in Avernus. I'm talking about MT Black, Joey Hake, Sean Merwin, Rich Lescaflair, and Ashley Warren. So go check those out. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget, RPGs are like sex. Hey Hey people, before we go, I wanted to talk to you about D&D Beyond. You've heard me say it before on this show, but I cannot tell you how much it helped me when I went to a convention last week in Hell, Michigan. Why? Because I didn't need to bring all of my books with me. I had everything right there on D&D Beyond. I brought my laptop, and I brought my tablet, and I had my phone, and I had all of the D&D books on there, and I didn't really need all those devices. I could have probably just used one. And most of the time I was just on my laptop because I could open tabs and have lots of D&D Beyond things open instead of having multiple books open before me. Anyway, you are definitely gonna want to check it out for that reason. Makes running games super duper easy. You can look stuff up. Seriously, there's free stuff on there. The basic rules, which are available for free, are also available for free through dndbeyond.com. So go check it out. Try running some of your games off there, and pretty soon you're going to be like, man, what was my life like before? It was D&D back, not D&D Beyond. D&D left behind. That's how you're living your life right now, Paul, and it's time to change, okay? Okay, Sally? All right? Just fix your life. Go dndbeyond.com. Do it. You won't do it.